I had always thought of myself as someone who could never be taken by surprise. Life had taught me the value of trust, of loyalty, and I had always believed that those things could never be broken. But then, there she was, Carla, my wife, the woman I had built my entire world around. I caught her. I didn't expect it, but I caught her red-handed. The moment she walked into the living room, I could see the tension in her shoulders. There was something off about her. I could sense it, the way her eyes avoided mine, the way her lips were pressed tightly together, like she had something to hide. I'd never known her to be secretive, but this was different. This was something deeper. I had never been one to spy on her, never been the jealous type, but lately, something had felt wrong. I noticed the late nights at work, the distracted phone calls, the empty promises that she was just busy. At first, I tried to ignore it, tell myself I was being paranoid, but the little things added up, and in the back of my mind, a knot formed, a knot that kept tightening with every passing day. Then came the text. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't plan to go through her phone, but there it was, flashing on the screen while she left it unattended. A simple message from a number I didn't recognize, but the words were crystal clear. I miss you. I'll be at the office late. Tonight. Can't wait to see you again. At that moment, everything inside me froze. The knot in my stomach tightened painfully, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I didn't need to see more. I already knew. I had caught her in a lie so deep that it felt like the earth itself had cracked beneath me. My mind raced, but I held myself together, pretending nothing had changed. Pretending I hadn't seen what I had just seen. When she came back into the room, she tried to act normal, but I could see the slight tremble in her hands. She was nervous, but why? She had no reason to be. Not yet. I didn't want to confront her immediately. Not yet. I wanted her to have a chance to come clean. But the longer I let her stew in her own guilt, the more my anger simmered beneath the surface. It was like a pressure cooker inside me, and I knew if I didn't release it soon, it would consume me. Later that evening, I decided to confront her. The silence between us felt suffocating as we sat at the dinner table, the clink of silverware the only sound. I could barely focus on the food in front of me. My mind kept returning to that text, to the truth I had uncovered. It gnawed at me, like a relentless hunger, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. "So, how was your day?" I asked casually, trying to keep my voice steady, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to confront her right then and there. She looked up, blinking at me as if I had just spoken a foreign language. "Busy. Work's been stressful." She paused, noticing my eyes on her, studying her every move. "What's wrong? You seem distant." "I'm fine," I lied, but my words felt hollow, and I knew she saw through me. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife, but she still didn't seem to understand that the truth was about to unravel. It wasn't long before I could see her begin to shift uneasily in her seat. Her hands fidgeted with the edge of her napkin, and her gaze darted around the room as though she couldn't decide where to look. She had no idea I knew, but I knew everything. Then I couldn't hold back any longer. I had to know if she would come clean or if I would have to pull it out of her. "Carla," I said, my voice low but firm. "We need to talk." She stopped moving. Her fork paused midair and the blood drained from her face. "About what?" I leaned back in my chair, eyes never leaving hers. "About you, about what's been going on lately." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because deep down, I knew the pain I was about to inflict was nothing compared to the betrayal she had inflicted on me. She swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze now. "What do you mean? I told you work's been—" I cut her off. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice growing colder. "I know about the texts, the messages from him. I know what you've been doing." Her face turned a ghostly shade of white, and her hand shook as she placed the fork down. She didn't even try to deny it. She couldn't. It was in her eyes. the guilt, the shame, the realization that the secret was out. I watched her, waiting for her to come up with some excuse, some explanation. But none came. Just silence. Her silence said more than enough. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I could barely believe the words coming out of her mouth. It just happened? I repeated, my voice sharp. Is that how you justify what you did? You just slipped up? She nodded, her tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry. I am, really. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and unforgiving. Well, you did. You've already hurt me more than you'll ever understand. In that moment, I didn't know if I wanted to cry or scream. My emotions were tangled in a mess of disbelief, fury, and heartbreak. I had given her everything, my trust, my loyalty, and she had thrown it all away for a lie, for a fleeting moment of pleasure with someone else. Carla looked at me, her expression pleading now. Please, I never wanted this to happen. I love you. I'm sorry. But I wasn't listening anymore. Her words meant nothing now. The truth had already come to light, and the damage was done. You can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to be okay, I said, my voice cold, void of the warmth it once held for her. You've shattered everything, Carla. And now it's time for you to face the consequences. The words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken promise. I knew deep down that this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of something far darker, something she would never see coming. The power had shifted, and in that moment I realized just how much control I had. She was the one begging for forgiveness, but I was the one who now had all the cards. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, her face pale. It was clear she hadn't expected this, didn't expect me to be this cold, this distant. She must have thought I would cave, that I would fall to my knees, beg for her to take me back, but she didn't know me as well as she thought she did. I had loved her once, truly and deeply, but the woman sitting across from me now was not the person I had married, the person I had loved. She was a stranger, a liar, a woman who had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor as I moved toward the window. The night was cold outside, the city lights casting long shadows across the apartment. I needed the space, the air, to breathe, to think, to plan. Carla's voice was shaky when she spoke again. Please don't do this. I made a mistake. I'll end it. I'll cut him off. Just tell me what you want, and I'll do it. I turned to face her, the faintest flicker of something, maybe pity, maybe anger, flashing in my chest. You don't get to dictate the terms anymore, I said, my tone even, almost too calm. You don't get to tell me what to do. You've already ruined this, Carla. There's no going back. Her face crumpled and she took a step toward me. No, please, I'll fix it, I swear. Just tell me what to do. I love you. I didn't mean to hurt you like this. Please don't leave me. I stared at her, my heart feeling like it was being crushed beneath the weight of her words. But no amount of pleading was going to change what had already happened. She had already made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. I had spent years loving her, trusting her, believing that our bond was unbreakable. But trust, once shattered, was impossible to repair. She had chosen someone else over me. And now it was time for me to show her what it meant to lose everything. Leave, I said simply. It wasn't a question. It was a command. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find the right words. What? What do you mean, leave? I mean, get out, I said, my voice unwavering. Pack your things. You're not welcome here anymore. For a moment, she didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me as though she couldn't believe what was happening, as though she thought I would fold under the weight of her sorrowful gaze. But I wasn't that man anymore. The man who would forgive, the man who would let her back into my life. That person was gone. And in his place was a man who had been pushed too far, who had been betrayed beyond repair. Carla stumbled backward, her breath hitching. "No, you can't mean this. You can't be serious." "I'm dead serious," I said. My gaze never wavered from hers. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." She stood there for a long moment, her shoulders trembling. I could see the tears in her eyes, but I didn't care. I had no sympathy left for her. None. Finally, she nodded, slowly. The fight seemed to drain out of her. She turned and walked toward the bedroom without another word. I heard her moving, around, packing her things, and a part of me wanted to feel something. Some shred of sadness, maybe even relief. But all I felt was cold, bitter rage. When she came back into the living room, suitcase in hand, I barely spared her a glance. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She had made her choices, and now she would have to live with them. "I'll be gone by morning," she said, her voice broken. "But please, please know I never wanted to hurt you." I nodded, but the gesture was empty. "I know, but you did." With that, she turned and left. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was alone. The silence that followed was almost deafening. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so hollow. The emptiness stretched out before me, but it wasn't the emptiness of a broken heart. No, this was something different, something darker. This was the silence before the storm, the calm before the destruction. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. I could hear her heels echoing down the hall as she disappeared from my life. But something inside me didn't want to let it end there. I wanted more. I wanted to make sure she felt the full weight of what she had done, felt the punishment for betraying me in the most cruel way possible. It wasn't enough for her to leave, to just walk away. No, I needed to make her regret everything, every single choice she had made. I sat down on the couch, the weight of what had happened settling over me like a suffocating blanket. I couldn't let this go. I wouldn't let it go. As the hours passed, my mind began to race, planning my next move. I had to make her feel the sting of her betrayal, to show her just how much pain she had caused. I knew what I had to do. It would be brutal. It would be unforgiving. But I wasn't going to stop until she knew exactly what it meant to break my trust, and I was going to make sure she never forgot it. The night dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling of her absence, despite the relief that came with her departure. I knew deep down that this wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about something much larger. It was about taking back control. It was about making sure she understood the gravity of what she had done. I wasn't going to let her slip away, thinking she could just walk out the door and forget. No, I needed to make sure she knew the cost. I spent hours pacing around the apartment, each step heavy with the weight of my decision. My thoughts were all over the place, filled with anger, frustration, and a desperate need for justice. But there was no justice to be found in her apology or her tears. The only way I could reclaim what she had stolen from me was to make her feel the consequences, to make her understand that her actions had repercussions far beyond what she could ever imagine. I went to the bedroom, the place where we had shared so many memories. The bed was empty now, and I couldn't help but think of the countless nights she had climbed into it with me, pretending everything was perfect while she carried on an affair behind my back. It sickened me to my core. But the disgust I felt didn't last long. The rage took over again, and with it came clarity. I could do this. I could make her regret every choice she made. The power, the control, was mine now. I pulled out my phone and texted a few people I knew could help. The plan I had in mind wasn't something I could do alone. I needed help, and I was going to use whatever resources I had to make sure Carla felt the full extent of what she had done. The first message I sent was to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years but knew could be trusted. They weren't in the city, but they knew people who were, people who could carry out a task with precision and discretion. I gave them a brief outline of what I needed, told them it had to be done quietly and without any trace back to me. They understood immediately. The second text went to someone else. Someone who worked in the same building as Carla. I didn't want to involve anyone too close to her, but I needed someone who could get information, someone who could get the details I needed to ensure my plan was flawless. That person would be my eyes and ears. I leaned back against the couch, the hum of the city outside almost drowning out the thoughts in my head. But there was no turning back now. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her leave without feeling the impact of her actions. Not just her leaving me for another man, but the years of lies, the deceit, and the broken trust. As I waited for responses, I ran through everything in my mind. I knew what had to be done, but there was still one detail I needed to consider. The final touch. The part that would leave Carla gasping in horror when she realized the extent of my retaliation. It was something that would ensure she understood the gravity of her choices, something that would show her that I was done being the victim. By the time my phone buzzed with responses, I felt a sense of cold satisfaction beginning to settle in my chest. Everything was falling into place. The messages I had sent were met with agreement and a swift acknowledgement of the task at hand. It was happening. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let her think she could walk away from this with no consequences. The next morning, I received the first piece of my plan, a small, innocuous detail that Carla would never have seen coming. It wasn't something she could easily brush off. It was something that would cause her unease, make her second-guess everything she had been doing, and that was just the beginning. I knew she would be furious when she found out, and I didn't care. Her anger was just another part of the game, one I was willing to play. The more she raged, the more I would enjoy it, because in the end, I wasn't trying to fix things. I wasn't trying to repair the broken pieces of our marriage. I wanted her to understand. I wanted her to feel the damage she had caused to me, to us. I thought about her reaction when she learned what I had planned. She would be desperate to try and undo it, to beg for forgiveness again. But it wouldn't work. I wasn't the same man who had loved her unconditionally. I wasn't the same man who had been naive enough to believe in her lies. I spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering more information, organizing everything into neat, controlled steps. Each piece of the plan had to be executed perfectly. It was all about timing, precision, and ensuring that Carla never saw it coming. That evening, I received a message from my friend. The first part of my plan was in motion. The ball was rolling. Carla wouldn't be able to ignore it for long. I felt a thrill of anticipation. I could almost taste her fear already, see the panic creeping into her eyes when she realized what was happening. She wouldn't be able to hide from it. She wouldn't be able to escape. Later that night, I finally received the final piece, the information I had been waiting for. It was the last step, the one that would make Carla's world come crashing down in the most unexpected way. She would never see it coming. I took a deep breath, staring at the phone in my hand. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. Not anymore. I had already decided that the pain I felt would not go unanswered. Now, it was time for her to understand exactly what it felt like to be betrayed. The final chapter of this twisted saga had arrived, and the air was thick with the anticipation of the storm that was about to hit. Every moment leading up to this had been meticulously planned. The people I'd reached out to, the details I'd gathered, everything was now aligned, perfectly poised for the ultimate strike. Carla had no idea what was coming, and that, in itself, was the most satisfying part. I stood by the window of the apartment, watching the city hum below, the lights blinking like distant stars. It felt like everything in my life had been leading to this exact moment. This dark, delicious moment of payback. The phone buzzed in my hand. A message from my trusted contact. I could feel my pulse quicken as I read it. The final piece had been set in motion. Everything was falling into place. I knew Carla would be expecting a confrontation, an angry exchange. She would think she could plead with me, that she could talk her way out of it. But she didn't understand that there was no talking now. The damage had been done, and now it was my turn to set things right, to make her feel the hurt she had caused, to strip away her sense of control, piece by piece. I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. It was her. She hadn't wasted any time. Her need to salvage whatever shred of dignity she could was eating at her. She'd come back, convinced that there was some chance left to fix this. She probably thought a tearful apology would do the trick. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. The door opened with a soft click, and there she was, standing in the threshold, hesitant. Her gaze was wild, frantic, but I wasn't fooled. She was still trying to keep up appearances, to act like she was in control, but I could see the cracks forming in her demeanor. The fear was starting to creep in, just as I had planned. "You," she began, her voice trembling. "You've done this, haven't you? What did you do?" I remained calm, watching her every movement. She was vulnerable now. For the first time in years, I could see her exposed, not as the woman who had betrayed me, but as a scared little girl who was finally facing the consequences of her actions. "What have I done, Carla?" I asked, my voice as cold as ice. "What you never thought would happen. You thought you could walk away, unscathed, that you could tear me apart and leave without a second thought. Well, now the tables have turned." Her hands gripped the doorframe, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. But it wasn't just panic anymore. It was realization. She had no idea what I was talking about. She thought I was bluffing. I'm sorry. I've already left him. I've already fixed it. I swear, I've done everything you wanted. Please, just tell me what you want and I'll make it right. I'll make up for everything." Her voice cracked as she spoke, her words falling apart. I took a step forward, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty space between us. "You don't get to make it right, Carla. You lost that right the moment you made the choice to betray me. No apology can undo the damage. No tears can take away what you did." She started to cry, the floodgates opening now that she realized the full extent of what was happening. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook so easily. I wasn't going to fall for her act, for her fake remorse. "Please," she whimpered, "I was stupid, I know. I know I made a mistake, but please, don't do this. Don't make it worse than it already is." I smiled darkly, stepping closer. "It's already worse than you could ever imagine, Carla. This isn't about forgiveness. This isn't about fixing things. This is about making sure you understand just how badly you've messed up. I'm not here to make your life easier. I'm here to teach you a lesson." The door clicked shut behind her, and she flinched at the sound. I could see her fighting to hold herself together, but it was too late. The chaos had already begun. At that moment, the first part of my plan came to fruition. My contact had followed through, and I watched as the notification pinged on my phone. A picture, one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A picture of her and her lover, taken on the day she thought I was none the wiser. The picture wasn't just a reminder of her infidelity. It was a symbol of her complete and utter betrayal, and I had made sure it would be shared with the people she least expected. Her phone rang, and I could see her face pale as she checked the screen. The message was from an unknown number. It was the picture, the one that would expose everything. Her eyes widened, her hands trembling as she dropped the phone onto the floor. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Now everyone will know," I said softly, savoring the moment. "Everyone will see what you did. The shame will follow. You everywhere you go. You'll never be able to escape it. You wanted to hurt me. You wanted to tear me apart. Now you'll see what it feels like to be exposed, to have your darkest secrets laid bare." She stumbled back, her face ghostly pale, her lips parted in shock. "No. Please, you can't. I—" But the words were useless now. The truth was already out. The damage was done. "I don't want your apology, Carla," I continued, my voice steady, unflinching. "I don't want anything from you. You've already given me everything I need, your lies, your betrayal, your selfishness, and now it's time for you to pay the price." Her body trembled and she turned to leave, but I stopped her with a single word. "Leave? Oh no, you don't get to leave this time. You'll stay and face what you've done." Her tears didn't faze me. They were nothing more than a reflection of her guilt. I wasn't interested in her suffering. I was interested in making her remember. And as I watched her retreat, broken and humiliated, I felt the cold satisfaction of having taken back my life. The revenge was complete. Not because of the damage I had inflicted, but because, in the end, she would never be the same. I had broken the facade, stripped her of her control, and shown her just how powerless she really was. As she disappeared into the night, I let out a slow breath. The weight of everything had lifted, replaced by the sweet satisfaction of having finally reclaimed my peace. I had won. And I knew, deep in my bones, that she would never forget the lesson I had taught her. The brutal, unforgiving revenge that had left her broken and ruined. The price of betrayal was steep, and she had paid it in full. For the first time in a long while, I felt free, and it was a freedom I would never let anyone take from me again.